home was about human dignity. Human dignity is the core of all human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Dignity is what binds us together, connects us as the human family. I found dignity everywhere. It's where you least expect it. People in the most adverse of circumstances will cling to it. The man in Serbia living in squalor who built a toilet out of a closet for his wife and 3 girls. The woman on the mean streets of LA plucking her eyebrows outside her tent. The beautiful plants cultivated outside the tiny coffin homes in Seoul. The flash of a big, beautiful smile from a woman in Nigeria living in what can only be described as hell. I have learned in the harshest of circumstances and the most intimate of ways and settings that the Human Rights Project really is about that, protecting and restoring human dignity. I have also learned that effective advocacy, especially at the global level, is kind of a mystery. I've been asked about my theory of change in a few interviews and funding applications along the way. Like, oh shit, I was supposed to have a theory of change. I guess my theory has been throw everything at it, including the kitchen sink, a lot of social and other media, some really good reports, and definitely a documentary film by a brilliant filmmaker. I have also learned that it takes way more than a single rapporteur to handle the demands of this position that carries with it substantial responsibility. Many have kindly complimented my work, especially recently. But really, what has been achieved in these last 6 years is not about me. Any effectiveness has been achieved through a community of people, and I mean a community, working exceptionally hard, and I mean exceptionally hard in many different ways to make it effective. I have so many people to acknowledge and thank. Let me begin with the staff at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who worked with me throughout the mandate. I know that at times, in fact, right up until yesterday, I was a demanding rapporteur, pushing boundaries and timelines. The staff at the OHCHR always rallied in my defense and worked the system so that it would work better for human rights protection. I give particular thanks to Juana, Gunnar, John, Madoka, and Natasha, and the most unsung hero of them all, Pascal, who helped me navigate the cumbersome and antiquated UN travel rules and always got me where I needed to go the way I wanted to go. I must thank all of the students who volunteered their time and research skills on thematic issues and country reports, and their supervisors from the universities of Toronto, Ottawa, and Maastricht. In particular, a big thanks to Samer, Penelope, and Ingrid. I thank the many grant makers who believe in this work and its importance. In particular, the government of Germany, the Ford Foundation, the government of South Korea, Miserior, and the Bertha Foundation. Let's face it, we cannot do this important work without resources. I hope you will remain confident in the necessity of this big project. Your support is invaluable. And to all of the NGOs out there, I cannot possibly give thanks to each and every one of you. You are my people. It is impossible to do the job of a rapporteur without your eyes and ears and analysis. So many of you work in incredibly difficult circumstances, and yet you still manage to help a rapporteur. There are several people whom I want to give extra special thanks. Megan Hooft, who started this journey with me and got me laughing at the get-go. Bruce Porter, a preeminent ESC rights advocate, scholar, and friend who helped conceptualize and write almost all of my thematic reports and whose commitment and vision I rely upon. Frederick Gerten, the director of the documentary film Push, who understood that revealing the truth about our housing systems could contribute to new conversations and systemic change. It was Frederick's belief in my work and my voice, and perhaps my hairstyle, that forced me to start taking myself a little more seriously, but not too seriously, to believe in my ability to make change and to do an even better job. He is a fierce advocate, a close ally, and a true friend, and in many ways has opened up the world to my work. A huge thanks to my non-UN team, Hasina, Caitlin, Sam, and Julieta. You are the real heroes, and I mean it. I need to tell everyone what together we have accomplished just in the last 6 weeks. And if I've forgotten something, Julieta will pipe in because she'll remember. We've drafted and released 5 guidance notes for states on COVID-19 and the right to housing, and 5 accompanying videos. We hosted 3 global roundtable discussions. We researched and wrote the first human rights-based national protocol on homeless encampments. We wrote and filed communications to Acalius and 3 states, and a communication on a Grenfell-related matter. We attended 3 Facebook Live events, 3 podcast interviews. We wrote 2, or was it 3, op-eds for major news outlets. We sent out 3 press releases. We drafted a funding proposal for COVID-related work. We participated in 7 media interviews. We prepped me for and presented at 8 Zoominars. And none of that touches on the everyday stuff. Formatting documents, maintaining our 2 Twitter feeds, establishing a new Instagram feed, updating a new website, drafting and editing a video script, funding reports, maintaining our accounts, etc., etc. And during all of the stress and tiredness and overwork amidst this nightmare COVID situation, I have received nothing but kindness and mutual support from my team. Amazing. What can I say? I am nothing without you. I need to take a moment to thank in particular Julieta Peruca, who has lived and breathed the Special Rapporteurship as my senior aide, always by my side, always in step, working tirelessly, putting aside her own interests to move forward the mandate, building relationships in 3 languages. Julieta, please believe me when I say you are simply exceptional. I promise you, there will be more laughter and talking and drinking of sparkling water and changing the world together. We just need that COVID vaccine. Last but not least, I have to thank my home team, my friends who stood by me, drank wine and coffee with me, and kept me grounded. My sisters and my parents for instilling and encouraging me and for having themselves such a strong sense of justice. Juliana and Soraya, you should know that our WhatsApps are a lifeline. You are always right there in my pocket, inspiring me and comforting me, like during an earthquake in Chile, or when I'm detained in Egypt. And Aleka, my biggest fan and Instagram queen, thank you for your love and support. I need to thank my childcare provider, Nadine, who was in fact my personal concierge before every single trip. And of course, my hairdresser. I think there's enough said there. And my spouse, David, who made it possible week after week for me to travel extensively and work long hours while ensuring everything was smooth on the home front. He is the rock. and to Cleo and Luke, my kids, who deserved a mom who was at home a lot more than I have been in the last 6 years. But alas, I promise you, you were always with me on every trip. And every trip I took was intended to make the world a better place for you. Okay, now let's get back to housing. The status of the right to housing globally. After 6 years of my tenure, I have this to say. There is a global housing crisis, and it is a human rights crisis. And it has been caused by the failure of governments to recognize and implement housing as a human right. The signs are everywhere. Homelessness is flourishing. It has become the new normal, including or especially in affluent states. People forced to live in tents, on sidewalks, in cars, on park benches. People continue to be evicted from their homes without any alternatives. Just imagine that for a moment, thrown out of your own home with nowhere to go. And these are often people already who have nothing or very little to begin with. Informal settlements continue to grow, often lacking basic water and sanitation, electricity, and garbage collection, perched beside railway tracks, on the steep side of mountains, on toxic lands. And meanwhile, global financial actors, supported by the laws and policies of governments, are allowed to wander the streets of the world, shopping for what they call assets, increasing rents, making housing unaffordable for the masses, while they reap massive profits. How is it that states have not only allowed all of this to happen, but have actively supported its happening? The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare so much of what is wrong with our world, including the housing crisis. The stay home, wash your hands, physical distance policy adopted by states around the world has confirmed that access to adequate housing is a matter of life and death. The stay home, wash your hands, physical distance policy, which seems so neutral, is in fact having discriminatory effects, exposing those without adequate housing to the greatest risk. Homeless people cannot stay home when they have no home in which to stay. People in densely populated informal settlements cannot physically distance, nor can they wash their hands when they have no access to water and sanitation. Renters and homeowners are fearful they won't be able to stay home if they can't pay their rent or mortgages and face potential eviction. Many have noted that states have recognized that the prescription to fight COVID-19 is one size that doesn't fit all. States have responded. Things are being done that many couldn't have imagined 8 weeks ago. Homeless being housed, moratoria on evictions, rent and mortgage deferrals, bailouts being refused to companies with headquarters in tax havens. Change appears to be afoot. Or is it? Homeless people are being ticketed and criminalized for not staying home. Mortgage and rent relief are really just deferrals to be paid back post-pandemic. Forced evictions continue to be carried out. And the institutional financial actors continue to circle, waiting for their opportunity to prey on the vulnerable, purchase distressed real estate with a view to lining their pockets once again. And governments fail to establish human rights oversight bodies as they respond to the crisis. COVID-19 has revealed something quite astonishing and quite ugly. It has revealed that it takes a global, deadly pandemic that could wipe out humanity to get governments to understand the relationship between housing and human life. And worse, even that threat is not enough for governments to guarantee the human right to housing for all. And so my team and I know that we need to keep pushing for a shift in approach, where housing is no longer viewed as a commodity and is instead embraced as a fundamental human right. And so though I am ending my tenure, we are actually just at the start of something. So before I sign off, I want to introduce you to the shift, the global movement to secure the right to housing. I'm going to ask my team to wave as I introduce you. Julieta Peruca is the Deputy Director of the Shift. Caitlin Schwan is the lead researcher of the Shift. Sam Freeman is our legal researcher. Hasina Manik, Director of Communications for the Shift. And Brennan Rigby, I'm not sure if he's online. He's head of our recently minted New Zealand Shift chapter. And I'm Leilani Farha, Global Director of the Shift. So, though I leave you in a few hours as UN Special Rapporteur, I will not be leaving the pursuit of a better world where enjoyment of the right to housing is the norm. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Leilani. Can I just do a quick check? Can everyone hear me? Yes. Great. I'll just introduce myself briefly. I'm Zoe Tabry, and I'm the property rights editor at the Thomson Reuters Foundation. So we're the charitable arm of Thomson Reuters. And we cover a range of underreported human rights issues, and for my team in particular, housing, homelessness, so very close to what you have all been doing. Thank you very much to Julieta and Leilani and the team for inviting me. Thanks to you all for joining, and I hope you're all staying safe. It's an honor to be part of the discussion, and Leilani, thank you for that powerful statement. And I think I speak for many of us, not just the journalists among us on the call, but also the housing researchers, policymakers, activists, and just citizens among us, in saying that it's been an absolute pleasure working with you, and that you and your team have done really crucial work in shining a spotlight on this hugely important issue. So just as a quick recap of how the discussion will go from now on, I've got a few questions that I'll be asking Leilani. Afterwards, we'll be taking a few questions from journalists. If you do have any, please do write them in the comment box on the right of the screen. It'd be great if you could include your name and your organization. After that, I'll be inviting brief statements from a few external partners. And then finally, we'll be taking any additional questions from the audience. So whether you're a partner, a journalist, or just someone who's interested in housing, please just pose your question and your organization. As Julieta mentioned, we'll try to get to them all, but if not, I'm sure we'll manage to send them to the team and have some kind of follow-up. So without further ado, Leilani, I'd like to pick up on where your remarks ended at, really. You mentioned the coronavirus pandemic and how it's laid bare so much of what's wrong with our world, including the housing crisis. You mentioned, the mantra of staying at home, washing your hands, and social distancing adopted by governments, and how that largely ignores the fact that millions worldwide cannot do this. I'm interested in those changes that we have seen to... Those changes that we have seen to adapt to the pandemic, from housing homeless people in motels to passing eviction bans, rent freezes, etc. Do you think those are likely to stay once countries emerge from the pandemic, or do they risk falling by the wayside, therefore reinforcing this already existing crisis that you've mentioned?
they definitely risk falling to the wayside. I've heard lots of governments, including the government of Canada, where I'm situated, say things like, we are addressing an emergency. These are emergency measures. This is not structural change. And they're that blunt about it. We're not going down the structural change road. That being said, I think they have a political disaster on their hands, those that have actually housed people living in homelessness, to then return them to the streets. I mean, that just looks bad, looks really bad. I don't think they necessarily care about the impact on the people, but I think they do care about how they look. And so, not to be too scathing, but so I think there's real risks. One of the things I'm most worried about, actually, besides obviously people living in homelessness and their plight, is renters who are being, in some cases, given deferral of rent. I think lots of landlords are really upset, and they themselves are struggling. And I'm worried that people will emerge with eviction notices, actually, for non-payment of rent during the pandemic period, or crippling debt. And so one of the things I've been saying is, I want people to emerge from this nightmare. This is a nightmare. We are all in a nightmare. And I want people to emerge from it. When the pandemic is over, I want people to emerge whole. I think that's how we should emerge, as a whole. And if you have crippling debt for 10 years, the pandemic doesn't end for you. And I think that's just unfair. So yeah, I'm concerned. I do think this is an opportunity. I recognize what people are saying. This is an opportunity. There are lots of people on this call who are trying to turn this into an opportunity, but I think a lot of us who are trying to do that are, we're finding we're hitting walls.
I think that that's a really good point, what you mentioned, kind of what happens once the pandemic, well, first of all, the pandemic is with us, likely for months, if not years to come. But as you say, those who may have been granted, for example, rent freezes, will be saddled with debts for months to come still. So how do we ensure then that those efforts don't lose steam? I know you've talked in the past about, of course, the moral imperative to secure safe and adequate housing for all, but how do we actually get governments on board and make, I know you've also talked before about the economic case and shining a light on the fact that, you know, a safe and secure house society is good for the economy, for example, by lessening the burden on healthcare systems. So how do we kind of make that case to governments and ensure that these efforts we're starting to see don't lose steam?
Yeah, it's difficult. I don't think it's going to be enough just to make arguments, because I've been making a lot of arguments, and I'm so have lots of people on the ground. And I think we have to avail ourselves of existing mechanisms to try to hold governments accountable. Human rights don't get suspended in the time of an emergency or crisis. In fact, quite the opposite. Human rights have to be most seriously considered when we're in the midst of a crisis, whether it's civil conflict, war, or whether it's a pandemic, the likes of which we're living through right now. That's why I said in my comments that governments haven't, I have yet to know of a government that has adopted a human rights oversight, created a human rights oversight body, or used an existing body like a National Human Rights Institution to monitor what governments are doing in this pandemic period, to make sure rights aren't being violated and that rights are in fact being upheld. There's this idea that we should build back better. It comes back from the humanitarian world, but we should build back better. And a human rights oversight body could be making sure that every decision taking actually puts us on a progressive path toward, in this case, the realization of the right to housing. But I don't see those bodies being established, but we need to push for those oversight bodies. We need existing mechanisms to be used. So whether it's regional or national human rights bodies, we need them to be active and engaged during this pandemic period to hold governments accountable. We need rapporteurs, special procedures to use their ability to hold governments accountable by sending out communications, for example. So I think we have to harness what we have and maybe build some new things as well.
Great, thank you. And following on from that, and this will be the last question from me because I don't want to monopolize the floor for too long and give time to others for questions, but could you tell us a little bit more, for those who may not on the call be familiar with the shift, about the work you'll be doing next, what the movement has achieved so far, and what you'll be focusing on in the next few months?
Yeah, sure. The shift is a partnership between me and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights at the UN and an international network of cities, United Cities and Local Governments. We came together because we all understood that there's a real need to create a social movement around housing as a human right, and a global one that brings together a whole bunch of different stakeholders with the idea of saying, hey, look, we are many and we have our own currency, and our currency is human rights, to combat the powerful actors out there who are treating housing differently and creating homelessness and forced evictions and unaffordability of housing and grossly inadequate informal settlements. As the shift has grown, what happened is cities became really engaged. And so mayors from around the world have kind of attach themselves to the shift. These are not mayors who necessarily are already doing the right to housing, because we would have a very teeny movement if it could only be made up of people who are actually doing, or governments that are doing the right to housing. But it's cities that are interested in a new approach and a new framework. And I think a lot of cities are really struggling, and they've been casting about trying to figure out what to do about the housing crisis that's on their doorstep. And so I think they see real value in a human rights approach. So the shift will help cities figure out how to do the right to housing domestically at the local level, what it means, what that looks like at the city level. So we'll be working with cities. But we also notice there is, in fact, a real gap at the global level of any international organization really focused on housing and its financialization, et cetera. So we intend to fill that gap by doing research, and we'll be doing sort of mini fact-finding missions to different cities around the world, and working with governments to improve their record on the right to housing and help them understand what it means, that it's actually a practical thing, that it means something to do the right to housing.
Right. And Leilani, I apologize in advance because I know this will embarrass you, but if I could just very quickly ask everyone on the call to unmute themselves for a few seconds and give you a big round of applause, to you and to your team. Thank you for all these weeks of work.
Hey. Hey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Bravo.
Bravo infiniment, Leilani.
Thank you, Leilani.
Bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo, et en tout cas, merci pour tout ce que vous avez pu
Thank
faire.
you very much, everyone. I think we could go on clapping for hours still. Yeah, I think it's nothing like those moments of solidarity. And again, Leilani, I think this shows just how grateful everyone here is for you and your team's work. So if you wouldn't mind all putting yourselves back on mute, please, that would be great. And for now, before I hand over to some of our external commenters and partners, I want to pick up on a few questions that have come up in the comment box, Leilani, for you. One of them that I'd like to start with comes from Johnny McLeary and asks if you have any advice to give to your successor as Special Rapporteur.
Good luck. Just listen to the people. The people always know how to guide us in our work. So just listen closely to the people.
Great, thank you. And another question, which is from Anwa. In which country or countries have you seen good examples of housing policy in favor of tenants, presumably whether as part of this coronavirus pandemic or in general?
I guess I'll speak generally, not with respect to the pandemic. I just want to say that where you'll find the best policies are where tenants have taken to the streets, taken to courtrooms, taken to the legislature to get those policies put in place. It's a huge battle, and so I always identify, of course, Spain and different parts of Spain, Barcelona in particular. I will say in the case of Barcelona, they have in place a mayor, Ada Colau, who's a friend and a colleague, who was elected on a platform that was based in the right to housing. So she gets it. But she needs to be pushed by people on the ground, and she is pushed. So they have some really amazing and interesting policies. I'm not going to get into them because it's kind of boring, but well, maybe it's not boring, but I don't want to be too technical. And Berlin, the Berlin tenant movement has been amazing, especially recently. For example, getting in place rent freeze, which is super important. In other words, rents will be frozen for 5 years, and really fought hard for that. So those are two that come to mind. I think the government of Canada at the national level, thanks to amazing advocacy domestically, has adopted some pretty model, interesting legislation, which creates a new mechanism within the country. Canada has long said that the right to housing, well, that housing isn't a human right. And so they've done an about face recently. So yeah, there are some really good models out there. I should also just mention the mayor of Seoul, South Korea, and he's done some interesting stuff with human rights in the city that has had an impact on housing as well. But there's lots of other examples. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take just one more question for now before we move on to external comments. And for those of you who have asked questions, don't worry, we've seen those and we'll come back to them just after the external comments. But just for now, another question from Roger Gervais, who is asking, can you expand on the issue of political donations by venture capitalists, the housing industry, and other actors responsible for our current state of endless human rights violations, and how this financial influence over our leaders needs to be addressed?
Yeah, I don't know that much actually about political donations, so maybe that's something the Shift will have to look into. I mean, I know that there is we could call it a symbiotic relationship between these big financial actors and those in positions of political power. I actually haven't investigated, how much is going in terms of political donations, and that's going to vary depending on the political system in place and how possible that is. But we know, for example, that the CEO of Blackstone, the largest private equity firm that has wreaked havoc in the lives of tenants around the world, Schwartzman, he is a good friend of Donald Trump's, for example. We read recently in the news that Blackstone has been very much engaged in the stimulus packages that have been put out by Donald Trump in the US. So those relationships are real. There's no doubt that those big financial actors have a lot of money and political influence. What was the rest of the question? The housing and other actors. Sorry, I can see it.
And how this financial influence over
needs
our leaders
to be addressed. Well, yeah. So I don't know how it can be addressed, except that we have to ensure that we get laws in place that regulate the financial actors. I mean, I'm more concerned about their impact on tenants than their impact on politicians. So, it's only insofar as their impact on politicians is bad for tenants that I care, to be honest. So we have to figure that out. I think that it's interesting that governments in the face of the pandemic have a few of them. I think it's Denmark, Poland, Canada now, and I actually think maybe the US, but maybe not, have said that stimulus package or bailouts won't be extended to companies that are based in that use tax havens to avoid paying taxes. So that's an interesting move. Maybe we can do something with that. And I think we just have to keep pushing that the big financial actors, if they want to be in the area of housing, they have to recognize that housing is a human right, and that business looks different when you engage in an area that's a human right.
Great, thank you. I now want to move on to a few external comments from colleagues of yours, partners, and people you've worked with over the years. Again, if you do have a question, please do post it in the comment box. If we can't get to it later, I promise we'll find a way to follow up with each one of you individually. But for now, if I could please ask Frederick Gerten to make a few comments, and to each one of our next few commenters, if you could please keep those as brief as possible, just so we allow enough time for questions. Thank you.
Hello, hello Leilani, hello everybody. It's amazing to see that there are so many people around the world listening to this and following this. I mean, we know each other now since, is it 3 years maybe? And you know, to make a documentary film is a very complicated thing, but if you have a very good human being in the middle of the film, it's easier to make it. And when we met and I understood that you had all those human qualities that can make it into a film, I was really, really happy. And I think, I mean, you're a great crier. We did cut out most of that in the film, but you, I mean, to trust a human being in a film, you need somebody also to show their softer spots. You can't just be a very good, high-performing person, because in the film you will look extremely boring. And Leilani has this kind of ability to be a human being all the time. And that's why she is so good in Push. We made it like a special clip for today. So if you allow, we can play it just to, you can have a little try. Some stuff from Push that wasn't really in the film, or part of it was, but can you, Julie, play it?
I always picture myself like I'm 5'2". I'm like one little person. I'm from this like nowhere place, Ottawa, Canada, and I'm trying to make a huge difference globally. I'm trying to change an entire conversation that's embedded in the way people live all around the world. I remember I was walking to work and I had my earbuds in and I was listening to like a really groovy song, and I remember feeling like, whoa, like not so nervous, more like, whoa, this is very cool and this is a huge opportunity. We need a shift. In fact, we need the shift. We need a worldwide movement to reclaim and realize the fundamental right to housing.
So that was like a little greeting from us. And am I still on here? I can't see myself, but anyway, that's one advice to Leilani, and that's always some wine. I know you're more into white wine, but cheers, and let's keep working together, because it's fun, and it's I think we keep each other sharp. So good luck and cheers.
Thanks, Frederick.
Thank you, Frederick. That was lovely, and no better way to celebrate than with a glass of wine. Julieta, over to you. I believe you had a few comments as well.
Hi, yeah, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such an incredible privilege to be with you here at the end of the mandate, and what I can quite easily say has been the most exciting journey of my life thus far. Just to give you a little bit of history, I started working with Leilani 4 years ago when I was barely out of law school and completely lost. And I'd be lying if I said I knew that I wanted to dedicate my life to advancing the right to housing. But when I saw the job posting, I knew that working with a UN Special Rapporteur was going to be something special. I just have never imagined how special that would actually be. It's safe to say that I easily accepted that fighting for housing as a human right would very quickly be the cornerstone of my life's work. And how could I not come to that realization when I had Leilani Farha teaching me? I really do still have to pinch myself when I think about how lucky I am to have the possibility to work and travel the world with one of the leading and most effective human rights advocates of our time. And there are so many invaluable lessons that I will take away from these last 4 years. And I'm going to share just a few of them because I think they're important for anyone working in our field. Leilani has taught me how to be fearless, a quality without which it would be impossible to further this work. If we're truly to change the narrative on how we view and treat housing, we're going to need to face very powerful forces, and we can't waste time fearing. And we definitely can't waste our energy doing that, at least not publicly. The way she's managed to be the face of a fight against corporations who wield immense power and influence, and all the while continuing to laugh and smile, it's something that I really do hope to emulate. Leilani is also incredibly constructive. Apart from being brilliant herself, she's always open to new ideas, new concepts, new terminology. She's always trying to learn, she's reading, she's always looking to grow. Even watching YouTube videos on finance, stock markets, real estate investment trusts, etc. This is such a strength of hers, and it has allowed her to be so effective in advocating in the sphere of financialization and housing, and even now during COVID-19. I think being so constructive quickly makes her an ally to many. And maybe this comes out of the knowledge that the only way we are truly going to make the change and really shift is by working together. We often say the forces out there undermining the social function of housing are united and global. So we also have to do the same. And finally, Leilani is kind, and she never misses the opportunity to laugh. Her kindness and her ability to continue laughing, sometimes through tears, is the quality in Leilani that I admire the most. And it is definitely what has kept me sane in the past 4 years. I just really want to quickly say how grateful I also am to have had the opportunity to work with so many people, some of you who are actually on this call, for showing me as well what it means to be a great advocate. If it weren't for people like Sonia and Cesare and Maria Jose and Santi and Rob, I wouldn't really know what it's like to be a grassroots advocate. So thank you, and thank you for your passion and also for your kindness. Even if sometimes you were just working with me to try to get through to Leilani, I still really, really appreciate it. And finally, to my new team, Hasina, Caitlin, and Sam, I am so happy that we are now 5 people, because the last 4 years, mostly with just me and Leilani pushing forward the shift, it was a little bit too much. So I'm so looking forward to the next few years working with you and moving forward the right to housing. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank you very much,
Julieta.
Julieta. Sorry, Leilani, did you want to say anything?
No, I didn't want to take up too much airspace. I just wanted to thank Julieta deeply.
Thanks, Julieta. And I'd now like to move over to Shivani Seshadri, if you are on the call.
Yeah. Hi. A big hello to everyone from India. And thank you so much, Julieta and Zoe, for giving me this opportunity. Can you hear me? Yeah, it is such an important and it's such an honor for me to share this time and space with you, Leilani, and with all these incredible housing rights activists. So, wow. I have a secret to share with you that even before you became rapporteur, I was really rooting for you to be appointed. I had never met Leilani, but I had heard about her work. And of all the people at that point, I really felt she was the best candidate. So I really hope none of them are here, but I'm really so grateful today at the end of 6 years that you were selected. And wow, you totally surpassed any expectations that anyone had. So a huge thank you for everything you have done. I first met Leilani when she came on mission to India in April 2016. So wow, that was 4 years ago. And we worked very closely on the mission. I know it was a difficult mission for you, but again, for housing rights activists in India, it was a hugely special moment to actually have the government agree and invite a special right here. So your work and your report is still used so much by us. And I think that was really the beginning of a great relationship and a friendship. I think I got to meet Leilani at so many different spaces in different places at the launch of the shift in Quito. And I am so excited that you're going to be carrying on that role. And today, at the end of your 6-year mandate, I really want to congratulate you on being an incredible special rapporteur on the right to housing. And I think that applause was just not enough. I really think you did a remarkable job despite all the challenges. So kudos to you for that and congratulations. And I really want to applaud you for the outstanding body of work that you have built and the legacy that you leave behind in all the reports and guidance notes and press releases. I think given the critical moment we're in, it's even more important. And I think this legacy is going to really help the entire world deal with the housing rights crisis and hopefully emerge from it together. And at a personal level, I really thank you for being so open, for always being so approachable, for always being there to support us, to listen to us, for your infectious energy and your laughter and your smiling, even when you've been so pressed with, demands from around the world. I appreciate it so much, and I'm so grateful to you for it. And as Julieta also mentioned, your kindness, your compassion, and even your humility, which struck me as really remarkable as someone in your position, to be so humble and so open and so willing to hear people and share moments with them and be one with them. So I don't want to take up so much time. I could speak a lot, but I really want to thank you and your team. All of you have been super special in this work and a really important part of the movement. And Leilani, you are a real star, and I know you're going to shine in whatever role you take on. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and looking forward to continuing the work with you. I have wine, but lots of love in my heart.
Thank you so much, Shivani. It's so nice to see you. So happy you're with us.
Thank you, Shivani. And I'd now like to hand over to Sonia Olea Ferrares.
Voy a pedir a Julieta que me traduzca, por favor, porque estoy muy emocionada. 3 cosas quiero decir. Una institucional, otra profesional y otra personal.
So I'm going to translate for Sonia because she's very emotional. She wants to say 3 things, 1 institutional, 1 professional, and 1 personal.
Institucionalmente, Leilani Farha ha conseguido que una institución tan antigua, tan conservadora, tan enorme como Cáritas Española, cambie dentro de sí misma y comience a trabajar con las herramientas de Naciones Unidas. Eso ha sido un logro del trabajo con Leilani que ha hecho posible confiar en esta forma de trabajar, y por eso Cáritas Española ahora está trabajando con muchos otros relatores y con muchas otras herramientas.
So one of the institutional achievements that Leilani's mandate has had is to actually take such a bureaucratic, sort of archaic institution like Cáritas España to actually start working on human rights and start working with special procedures. It started with Leilani, but now that has extended to a lot of different mandates.
La segunda es profesional técnica y es el aporte concreto que Leilani ha hecho junto con todos vosotros, contigo Julieta, con Bruce, con Gunnar, con John, con tanta gente, con Victoria, con tanta gente, en el aporte del, no sé decirlo ni en español, de la emoción, el aporte que ha hecho del enfoque del derecho humano a la vivienda en las políticas públicas, con claridad, sistematizado, con herramientas, con evaluación y con propuestas.
So you've also brought forward this incredible work that has actually put right to housing in the center of public policy. And you've brought it forward through reports, through tools, through guidelines, through very clear standards and measures that are being implemented, that are being used now.
Y el tercero, personal, que ha sido mostrar al mundo que se puede ser muy buena abogada con muchísima pasión, con muchísimo corazón, y eso ha sido muy importante para mujeres como yo misma, que intento ser también así, y ha sido un gran aporte de demostrar que se puede ser mujer, que se puede ser apasionada, que se puede soñar y a la vez ser un buen jurista y ser un buen abogado y cambiar el mundo. Muchas gracias.
And the other personal note is that you've been able to show that you can be a woman, you can be passionate, and you can also be a great lawyer, and you can be a great legal mind. So that has been great to show. Thank you very much.
Y solo nos falta vernos en Madrid el año que viene, así que te espero en Madrid el próximo enero, febrero o marzo. Gracias.
And now we just need to see each other in Madrid next year. So we'll wait for you in Madrid in January, February, March.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Thank you. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you, Sonia, and thanks, Julieta, for translating. If I could hand over now to Rob Robinson.
So, excuse me. Hello, everybody. This is Leilani. This is truly an honor. And Julieta, thank you for inviting me. I'm going to speak mostly from a human perspective. I'm going to speak on behalf of grassroots movements and social movements here in the U.S. because you've definitely shifted our thinking here in the U.S. And I'm going to speak to a couple of instances. The first is, well, let me say first that I first met you in Toronto in 2011 at the University of Toronto. And I think it was through Emily Paradis, who I saw on this call also. So it's amazing how some things come full circle. But it was in Detroit where you started to have an impact on people on the ground. A couple of months into your mandate, Detroit had asked you to come to Detroit to understand the challenges around water in Detroit, and you accompanied Katerina de Albuquerque, the rapporteur on the right to water and sanitation, and that forever changed the thinking of people in Detroit, and you echoed their voices and you shone a spotlight around the world on what was happening in the wealthiest country in the world and how people were being neglected. So always appreciative of that. I think the next time that you were really influential was when you accompanied, you were here for the high-level political forum in New York City, and we took you into the Bronx, into a community park that was recaptured by the city, and the folks in New York always had the same exceptionalist attitude as a government that, you know, human rights is this thing that's away. And their mouths dropped when I introduced you as the UN Special Rapporteur, and you're there in shorts and a tied-up shirt, and they still talk about it. They still honestly talk about it. So you've forever changed the thinking and made folks understand that there is this thing called the human right to housing. There was another time when I asked you to speak to shelter providers in New York that can only think of housing as this commodity, a way, if we don't have resources, we can't build housing. And you took up a half an hour of their meeting to explain the human right to a home. And I think that forever changed the thinking of those folks in that particular meeting. So I'm honored to have met you and have worked with you and to be accompanied by you into communities. And I think two reports that will forever remain in my toolbox. The letter to Blackstone in the US government is a tool I still use today. And the report on informal settlements when our US government said there's no such thing in the US, and you documented it for us. Powerful. You can see I'm covered in tears behind this, but I've appreciated your work, what you've meant to us on the ground in the US. And I look forward to continuing with you working in the shift. The shift means to me that I've gone from calling myself a human rights defender to a human rights enforcer. And that's because of language that you gave us. So I thank you, God bless you, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Rob. Rob, we've been around the block. Thank you so much for that. And I wouldn't be a good advocate if I didn't tell you something's coming out this afternoon that you're gonna like and you will be able to use in your work in the US. So look for it. It'll be all over Twitter.
Thank you, Rob. And finally, I'd like to hand over to Santi Demas.
Hi, thank you, sorry. Hello, I'm Santi here from Barcelona, but I'm speaking on behalf of the Platform for People Affected by Mortgages, the PA. And PA is, for the ones that you do not know us, PA is a Spanish grassroots organization that was established in Barcelona in February 2009. And today we have more than 210 nodes all across Spain. At PA, we fight for evictions and we seek changes to laws that guarantee the right to housing for all. At PA, people directly affected by housing and fair access organize in solidarity with others. We are an horizontal organization with no professional or paid staff, and our work is free of charge, non-partisan, but extremely political, and we practice non-violent civil disobedience. In our 11 years, we have stopped thousands of evictions, and we have retaken empty buildings from bailout banks or vulture funds and forced changes in laws and local and state level. We even have done international actions with Rob in New York against Blackstone and many other actions that with some people that are around in this call. So for a grassroots organization like PA, the work done by Leilani Farha as United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing, with the invaluable help from Julieta Peruca, then we do not want to forget about her extremely great work, has been of vital importance for all of us. Her courage, denouncing the financialization of housing, and her fight against vulture funds like Blackstone has allowed us to use her reports, letters, public statements, and papers, not only in our press release, in our campaigns, but also when we do pressure governments that promote or allow such an abuses. Our words were no longer the words of the people from the city, but from the street, but were the UN rapporteur words. They were the UN words, and that was so important for us. Her visit to Spain and her public statements about the housing situation here has strengthened our demands for answers and action from the Spanish government. And they have legitimized our struggle in the face of political structures used more often to listen to financial and real estate lobbies than to the citizens that are supposed to represent. Especially relevant for us, as Rob was also mentioning, was the letter written to Mr. Schwarzman, chairman, CEO, and founder of Blackstone on March 2019. And I want to quote specifically what she told Mr. Schwarzman in that letter. She said, we are equally concerned that Blackstone has used considerable resources and political leverage to influence housing policy in a manner that is inconsistent with the right to housing. Or she also mentioned that we draw your attention to the fact that a number of policies and measures are inconsistent with international human rights laws and norms. The threat of evictions creates fear, anxiety, and housing insecurity, inconsistent with requirements of the right to housing. When Leilani was advising the new rapporteur to listen to the people, well, precisely this is what we felt she did in our case, and that's why she was capable of becoming also our voice. That for us was so important. So for us, Leilani Farha work as well as all other former rapporteurs helps organizations like PA continue to fight for housing as a human right. Voices like hers help building a global awareness about the violation of the of the right to housing, which are the cause of many situations of global injustice, and also brings the right of the city as an horizon of change to achieve a better and fairest world. We need our voice to fight in unison. So from all of us at PA, we would like to tell you what we always said is, si se puede, yes we can. So I'm sure we will keep doing things together in the future. Thank you very much. Also through a glass of wine, which is always a good companion.
Thanks so much, Santi. And it's super nice to see you. I haven't seen you in so long. Thank you so much.
Santi, and actually before final questions, I'm told we have final comments from Seshadri Ottilini. Seshadri, if you're with us, if you could unmute yourself, thanks.
Aprovecho que hay nuestra amiga Julieta. ¿Puede traducirme? ¿Sí?
Sí, seguro. So I'm going to translate again.
Mira, ya hemos agradecido el trabajo hecho por Leilani, por ti, todo el equipo. Creo que está súper. No quiero ir más allá que agradecer una vez más. Sin embargo, en la pregunta que he puesto, ¿me escuchas? Sí,
Sí,
adelante.
déjame nomás decir, we're really thankful for all the work that you've done and the work that the team has done. It really just wants to say thank you. But
En la pregunta que he puesto en el chat, ya estamos pensando como Alianza Internacional de Habitantes de seguir este trabajo junto, porque seguramente hay The Shift, seguramente hay muchos, somos más que 150 hoy solamente en esta reunión, que están con ganas de luchar, trabajar.
But now we need to consider how we're going to keep moving forward this work. Obviously as the shift, but there's also over 150, or there have been over 150 participants in this call alone who are themselves moving forward the work, who are themselves struggling, fighting, etc. So how are we going to move it forward?
Y hay varios dossiers que siguen siendo abiertos. El último, el caso de Tunisia, donde la gente sin techo está afectada por el coronavirus, el gobierno nos está dando soluciones concretas, o el caso de las chabolas de los migrantes de Italia del Sur. No es solamente Nueva York o el Sudáfrica, hay también este pequeño o grande problemáticas que están abiertas en la mesa. Estuvieron en la mesa de Leilani. Ahora ver cómo dar seguimiento.
So there's also these different cases that are still open, like the case that we saw in Tunisia, where the government isn't protecting people from COVID-19, or there's the case of migrants, labor migrants living in Sicily that have been on your desk, Leilani, and now will remain on the next rapporteur's desk. So what can we do with those?
El portal que se ha abierto sobre la posible alternativa va a ser cerrado rápidamente. No, desafortunadamente hay que aprovechar este tiempo. No es un tiempo largo, son unos 2-3 meses.
So this portal has been opened with this pandemic is, we need to take advantage of it. It's not going to be a very long time that we have, but we have about 1 to 2 to 3 months to really take advantage of this crisis.
Ya hay los buitres que están pensando de acaparar vivienda, etcétera, etcétera. Y políticas neoliberales que van a endeudar los pobres, la clase mediana también. Entonces, pensamos como en un medio plazo podría ser octubre, organizar, movilizar. Octubre, como sabes, es el mes de la Jornada Mundial de Cero Desalojos, el mes de la Jornada Mundial del Hábitat, del derecho a la ciudad. Pensamos juntos.
So what we need to do now in this time is think together about what we can do to prevent neoliberal policies, particularly from impoverishing those who are already in low and middle income classes, and how we can push forward, possibly in the midterm, looking to October to do something together, as October is a pretty significant month. It's the month where Zero Eviction Days happens. It's the Habitat Day, as well as Right to the City Day.
Sí, y de esta manera movilizar nosotros y también, con suerte, esperamos, el nuevo rapporteur para el derecho a la vivienda. Esperamos que sí, de implicarlo, que esté junto con nosotros.
And we hope in this way that we can also influence the next rapporteur as well to keep fighting with us.
Bueno, es todo. Adelante. En solidaridad.
Solidarity and keep moving forward.
Thank you so much, Cesare. And I take all of your points. I think the opportunity of the pandemic is closing every minute, actually. I'm quite fearful. I think we don't have 2 or 3 months. I feel we have like a few days. Really, every time I'm opening the newspaper, I'm feeling this more conservatism coming back, you know, so, or a better term, neoliberalism. Oh.
Thank you, Cesare and Julieta. We're now going to move on to a few final questions from the audience before we wrap up in a few minutes. I first got one from Hilary Evans, who says, those of us who work in the field, how can we support and amplify your ongoing work? I'm not sure exactly which organization Hilary works for, but if you could perhaps take it in the broader sense, Leilani. So those of us who work, say, in housing, but also who may not directly work in housing. So if you're just a citizen who's interested in housing issues, how can they also support your work?
I mean, it depends on the context, et cetera, but of course, everyone has a stake in housing. So that's a really good starting point, is to take your stake in housing, right? Everyone has a stake in it, obviously. And now we're learning from COVID that we are all interconnected. Humanity is interconnected. So if someone doesn't have a home, it's going to affect you. We know that from this pandemic. I think there's lots of things you can do at an individual level. I do think we're in this kind of new world, new reality now with this pandemic, but you know, you have to encourage your local representatives to take seriously housing as a human right, whether that's a city council member or whether that's whatever, a member of parliament or a representative, government representative of some sort. You have to voice that as something that's meaningful to you as just an everyday person. There's political actions you can take, but now, you know, I was going to say, for example, you know, we used to say, think twice before you book an Airbnb in a city that may not regulate them. But I think Airbnb is going down now and no one's traveling. So, you know, those sorts of things ring hollow at the moment. I think apprise yourself of what it means to say that housing is a human right and really talk about it that way. I think that's a huge thing. I think you can use and harness the film Push. I think it's an important vehicle. And right now, especially in the US, it's not being screened, obviously. It was supposed to, in fact, yesterday, we were supposed to have the theatrical opening of Push in New York. And of course, that's not happening and theaters are closed. Around the world. But you can contact Frederick and they can get the film to you and you can have community screenings and then conversations through Zoom or whatever to talk about the issues and try to figure out what's going on in your own town or city or whatever state or province and in terms of financialization. Who owns the housing in your neighborhood?
Thanks, Leilani. I've now got one more question from Kieran Taylor on behalf of Unanima International. How will the shift ensure that the invisible homeless are recognized, including whole communities residing within inadequate and insecure housing, such as slums?
That's my life's work. So that's going to continue with the shift, that's for sure. I was kind of amazed when I came into the role as rapporteur that homelessness actually hadn't featured more in the work of my predecessors. And of course, they were busy with many other incredibly important issues. And I'm not casting aspersions, but only to say, I mean, you know, homelessness has to be eliminated worldwide. And in fact, COVID should have resulted in the elimination of homelessness. I mean, if the World Health Organization and governments around the world are going to adopt a stay-at-home policy or rest in place policy, that the only logical extension of that is the elimination of homelessness. Of course, you know, anyway, so that's a big struggle that that will continue to be top of my agenda. And there's lots of different advocacy avenues for that, whether it's using human rights mechanisms, the international human rights system, whether it's using social media, whether it's writing reports, researching, visiting places, highlighting. I mean, I'm in for all of it, and we will all work together. Homelessness is meant to be eliminated by 2030 under the Sustainable Development Goals. And as I said, COVID should have been a big kickstart on that.
Thank you. We've got two more questions, and apologies again to those of you whose question we won't get to, but I'm sure we can find a way to follow up. This one from Claire McGillivray, who asks, in Scotland, the SHRC is looking at human rights budgeting as a tool to hold the Scottish government to account for budget decisions. Are any countries already using HR budgeting to influence housing finance?
Yes, and I'm sorry, but because I'm emotional and not feeling like so whatever, right or left brained, whatever it is, I can't remember where. I think Costa Rica. I have this feeling Costa Rica does human rights budgeting, but I'd have to check. It is being done in a few places. It actually tends to be done more at the local level than at the national level. Some places have done gender budgeting, which is quite close to human rights budgeting. And I think my dear, dear, dear friend, Julie Delahanty, is here somewhere in this Zoom world and could probably answer that better than me. So look her up. She's with Oxfam. Julie Delahanty. In any event, I think human rights budgeting is super interesting. I actually think there should that human rights and the right to housing should be part of all governance and decision making, not just limited to budgeting. So it should be the sieve through which every policy decision has to pass through. You know, so. Not just resource allocations, but certainly it's a good start.
All right, thank you. And finally, a question from Lillian Chow, who asks, how can housing nonprofits work with you and your team at The Shift?
Yeah, first of all, housing nonprofits need to work with us in The Shift. Visit our website. There's a contact us area, put in your details and we shall be in touch. We are now, because now we have more time that I'm not the rapporteur, we will be moving really fast and furiously to bring lots of people on board The Shift.
All right, thank you so much. I think we're running slightly out of time, but I can see from the comment box that there are still tons of questions. So again, I would encourage you to get in touch with The Shift, but I'm sure the team can find some way of using these questions as well. To all of you, thank you so much for joining. Leilani, thank you very much for your time. And again, it's been such a pleasure to work with you. And I will hand back to Julieta for closing remarks.
Julieta, can I just say one thing?
Yeah,
that
you can close.
No, I don't want to close. You're going to close. But I just wanted to say, it only came through a little bit in my comments, but I've had this conversation with Zoe, but I want to just reiterate. One of the things I have learned as rapporteur is how important journalists are in human rights work, and different kinds of journalists. And I want to thank Zoe for presiding today. I think that's what Julieta was going to do too, but not just for presiding, but for walking in step, certainly with my mandate over the last years, and doing really important journalism work and coverage of the issues that I care so deeply about and that are so important to the well-being of so many people around the world. You know, I can write an op-ed, but it's really difficult to do the kind of investigative journalism that's necessary to expose what's actually going on. And I have found, I know a lot of people are really wary of journalists and like, oh, you know, they're going to change my words, whatever. I have found consistently journalists make me sound smarter and more succinct than I actually am, as all of you have now just been exposed to, and have really done an amazing job at highlighting, especially financialization. The number of reports and stories that are coming out now about this stuff, the coverage that I've received has been phenomenal. So I just want to say that I let us not forget of journalists as our allies. Now I'm handing back to you, Julia.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I wanted to say thank you, Zoe, so much for chairing this conversation. And also thank you to everybody that joined us today and everybody that has been with us for the last 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 years. You have all been so indispensable to the work. I think you have provided myself, at least, a lot of energy when there was none, maybe. So thank you to everyone. And with that, I am going to reiterate that if you do want to become part of The Shift, we've left the link in the chat so that you can fill in a form and we'll be in touch with you shortly. And yes, and a big thank you to Leilani.
And from me to all of you, my heart's beating a lot. Thank you so much, all of you. And as they do in Korea. That's love. That's just a little bit of love.
That's love.
Much love and respect back at you, Leilani. Thank you, Julieta.
Thanks, Rob.
Both of you has been incredible. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Stay in touch.
Bye.
Thank you. Love
See
you
you on the
guys.
streets.
Thank you.
Aloha. Bye.
Aloha.
Thank you so much. Aloha.
Thank you.
Bye.
Chao Leilani,
Bye,
chao
Isabel.
Julieta, gracias por
Love
todo.
you.
Thank you very much.
Grazie a tutti, grazie.
Nos vemos en Madrid, nos vemos en Madrid.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Oakland.
All right. Now with the title, UPR holding the US
Great
accountable.
job.
Maybe you could say UPR holding the US accountable for human rights and rights cannot be delayed is the title of the event. And then
¿Dónde está esto? Yo, ¿sabes que no se sortea de aquí? Esto que no sea para leave the meeting aquí abajo a la derecha.
Bye. Thanks. Great to see you.
Bye, Alyssa. Bye.
Hi and bye.
Bye. I'll see you soon.
Happy last day. See you soon.
Thanks. Bye.